If you're in need of a really good laugh right now, you have come to the right place. In this book break video, I've got 11 book recommendations that will properly make you lol. These books have literally made me laugh out loud. So let's get straight into them. The first few are all told in diary format because that is so often such a hilarious format for a book. So we're starting with Diary of a Somebody by Brian Bilston. So this book is a year in the life of the fictional poet Brian Bilston, and it starts on the 1st of January when he decides that his New Year's resolution is he's going to write a poem every day. And then we watch him try and keep up this resolution and fail, and also document all the other ridiculous things that happens to him in this year. And when I say ridiculous, I really do mean it. It ranges from everything to him trying to organise all of his bookshelves by ISBN number and then realising that that's a totally useless way of doing it, all the way to becoming the suspect in a murder. It is a completely bonkers year. And the whole way through it, you do get his really funny poems dotted in. He's got such a great style. If you go onto Twitter and look up Brian Bilston, that's his fake name. He does write these really hilarious commentaries on what's going on in the world. Sometimes really mundane things, sometimes really big things, but always in this really accessible and just laugh out loud hilarious way. This book had me properly in stitches. Which then brings me to, talking of stitches, This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. So this is another diary one. These are the diaries of a junior doctor. So this is Adam Kay looking back on the 10 years that he spent working as a doctor in the NHS and revisiting the diaries that he kept at the time. And I never knew that the life of a doctor could be that funny. It's such a good balance, this book, because it really portrays all of the incredible hardships of being a doctor within the NHS and the ways in which the NHS just needs more funding. So it's really a powerful and persuasive book, but along the way it is just so funny. Adam Kay has such a good sense of humour and such a hilariously dry way of looking at the sometimes pretty awful situations that he found himself in. So there's a reason this book has been so huge. It really is that funny. And then a classic diary is Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. So this one, you've probably seen the film a million times. The book is so brilliant. This follows the life of Bridget Jones, a young single woman in her 30s, going through so many relatable things. So her struggle with body image, her rather up and down relationship with her mother, her love life, which is often a complete disaster, love triangles everywhere, and also her friendships, which are kind of the most important family that she has at that stage in her life. So there's a reason this one is so timeless, because it's just got so many things that we all go through in it, and it's also got a touch of the guilty feminist about it, because there's quite a lot of Bridget talking about wanting to be a feminist, but also not sure how to balance that with wanting to make herself attractive to men, for example. So it's just really relatable stuff. It reminds you of the kind of conversations that you have with your friends in a pub. Now the next one on my list is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, which is a book that I haven't read, as you will know if you watched me trying to sum it up in 20 seconds, but I've been told by everyone who's read it that it is hilariously funny, and I googled some quotes from it and instantly confirmed that was true. My favourite quote I found was, "In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move." So this is a kind of quirky sci-fi story that I'm actually really excited to read now. And it's got a whole series, so there's plenty to keep you laughing. There's 5 books, and also there's the original radio scripts, because it was a radio play before it was ever a novel. And then I've got Notes on a Big Country by Bill Bryson. So Bill Bryson is an American writer, but he's lived most of his adult life in the UK. But he went back to the States for about 8 years from 1995, and that's when he wrote Notes from a Big Country, which is his observations of the United States as essentially as an outsider. And it is just so funny, highlighting so many of the weird quirks about the States. My favourite section that I cannot read without crying with laughter is when he talks about the process of filling out a US tax form. Now, I've never tried to fill out a US tax form. I have no frame of reference to this. I don't even understand the context, and yet I find it so hilariously funny. So if you are American, I can only imagine it's even funnier. And then another one that I've read cover to cover multiple times and it still cracks me up is Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by Jen Campbell. So this was originally a blog that Jen used to run where she documented some of the hilariously strange things that customers said when she was working in the bookshop ripping yarns. And they're just so ridiculous. You would think these people had never even heard of a bookshop before, or never even heard of a book before. Like, one of the customers asks if a book is edible at one point. And again, there is a sequel, so once you've read the original several times over, as I have, there is then more Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops. Now, one of the most ridiculous novels I have ever read is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson. So this is kind of like a Swedish Forrest Gump. So we have two timelines. In present day, Alan Carlson is living in a retirement home. He's just had his 100th birthday and he decides to climb out the window and escape. So he goes on to meet up with this whole cast of equally odd characters. He accidentally steals a suitcase full of money and then kickstarts this whole ridiculous criminal adventure. There's an elephant involved at one point. It gets very farcical. But throughout that, we're also getting flashbacks to Alan Carlson's life growing up. And it turns out that he played a key role in basically every major historical event of the 20th century. I honestly don't know which timeline is funnier to read, but overall this book was one of my favourite reading experiences ever. And if you liked that one, it turns out that Swedish farcical senior citizen comedy is a whole genre, because you can then read The Little Old Lady Who Broke All the Rules by Katharina Ingelman Sundberg. And again, this is just the start of a whole series, so plenty more for you to enjoy. In this first one, we meet a little old lady who is tired of living in her care home and decides what she really wants is to live a life of crime. So she and a few other people from the care home call themselves the League of Pensioners, and they break out from the care home and go off on this Robin Hood style adventure, sticking up for senior citizens everywhere. Now, a classic is Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome, and I really remember bringing this book on a holiday with friends and trying to read out sections of it to them that I thought were so funny, but I literally couldn't get the words out because I was laughing so hard. So this is the story of three men and a dog, Montmorency, who go on a 2-week boating holiday along the Thames. And it was written in 1889, but it doesn't seem dated at all. The humour is so fresh. The incident that's called in the contents George and His Shirt, A Story with a Moral is probably my favourite part of the whole book. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but do go and read it and then come back and comment when you've appreciated how brilliant that little episode is. And then another classic is My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell. So this is a kind of exaggerated autobiography about Gerald Durrell's life and his hilarious family. And this is the first book in the Corfu trilogy, so between all three of them they cover Gerald Durrell's childhood in the beautiful Corfu. So young Gerald Durrell, who grew up to become a naturalist, started his love for wildlife then. So we get these descriptions of nature, but also we get him observing his rather eccentric family as if they were also slightly strange animals. And it's just these hilarious observations of family life from the perspective of the youngest child. And then finally, while we're on the topic of eccentric families, A Not Quite Perfect Family by Claire Sandy is described as being perfect for anyone who loves their family so much they're just like a weekend away from them. So this is a year in the life of this big, imperfect family. It begins and ends with their midsummer supper in the garden. So the year is kind of compared to this 12-course fancy meal, with each course being a different month. And it's got a great cast of characters here, from the 8-year-old militant feminist Tallulah to the family's cleaner Evka, who tells these really sexually explicit stories. It will make your family look almost normal. Maybe not my family. So if you're looking for even more books to make you laugh, we did make a whole video about funny classics, particularly classics that you might never have realised were comedies. So do click through to have a look at that video for even more recommendations. And we'll see you next time.